Welcome to the Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well podcast, the podcast for women who want to lose weight but are tired of counting and calculating all the food. I'm your host, Lisa Salisbury. I'm a certified health coach and weight loss coach, and most importantly, a recovered chronic dieter. I'm going to teach you how to figure out why you are eating when you aren't hungry instead of worrying so much about what you are eating. Today is tips and tricks for your A-line. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. This is episode 46, which I'm excited about because that means I am quickly approaching the 1-year mark. When I get to episode 52, I am going to be really excited to have been doing this podcast for an entire year. So today I wanted to cover five. I have 5 tips for you that are little things I tell my clients, and I feel like they're not enough to do a whole episode. So I just thought, well, I'm going to lump them together. I'm going to lump these little tricks and tips together. And the reason I specified that they're for your A-line, that's your action line when it comes to the model. So much of what I do is in the thought line. I always am helping my clients with their thoughts and their feelings. I want to know what is the root cause of what is happening, and that is their thoughts. If you're familiar with the self-coaching model that I use, the first line is circumstance. That's what's going on. That's just the facts. The second line is your thoughts, and that is your interpretation of the facts. Those are the sentences in your brain that are happening because of what is going on around you. Makes you feel a certain way. That's the third line. The F line is the feeling line, and that drives your actions. That is the A line. Your A line is all the things that you do and don't do. So procrastination, I always like to make mention, goes in the A line. So it's the things that we do and we don't do. And then that gives you the results in your life. So we can always tie the results back to the thought line, never back to the circumstance. The reason that we know that is we can put two people that are completely different and yet are experiencing the same exact circumstance. The most common thing that I see with my clients is I have 2 people, they're experiencing the same scale weight, which is a circumstance because that is just math, and they have completely different thoughts about it, especially when I have clients whose current weight is one of my other clients' goal weight. We have all different weights with my clients. Some are tall, some are short, some are female. I have a male client. Everybody has a different goal weight and a different current weight. And so I see this a lot where we have drastically different thoughts about the same number on the scale. So yes, I spend a lot of time in the thought line, but every once in a while, I'll tell a client, you know what, we're going to get into your A line. We're just going to get into some actions to get done this week. And sometimes we'll discuss some thoughts that can drive those actions. Other times I'm like, I don't care what you think. It doesn't really matter. I just want you to push through and do these actions. Another way you can think about it is just thoughts like, she told me this would work, so I'm going to try it. That is a perfectly acceptable thought, and curiosity then is maybe the feeling that it creates, and you try it anyway. So don't worry too much about what you have to think in order to do these things, but they are, like I said, highly action line driven. So they're not really connected other than these are things that I use for my weight loss clients. So number 1 is turn the lights off. This is a trick that I have told my clients for years now. When you are finished with a meal, especially if you are a stay-at-home mom or if you work from home and you're eating breakfast and or lunch at home by yourself, this trick, this A-line is really important for those in those situations. If you are eating out every lunch or if you eat in a break room and eat with others, this isn't really as applicable for you, maybe on the weekends. But the idea here is that if you think about when you go up to a store that you're wondering if it's open, if you're noticing that the lights are off, that's your first indicator that that store or that restaurant is closed, right? You don't have to really check the door. If you walk up to it, you don't have to kind of open and see if it's locked. You can just look inside and notice the lights are off. I think they're closed. That is the idea here, is that we want to indicate to the brain that the kitchen is closed. So when you are done eating, when you're done with your meal, you're going to tidy up with whatever time you have, whether that's just putting the food away and putting the dishes in the sink, or maybe you have time to load and do all the dishes. Regardless of that, you're going to tidy up, complete the meal. And then when you leave the kitchen, you turn the lights off. I know this is not a huge deal, but for much of my stay-home mom years, the lights in the kitchen, because it was kind of the main part of the house, they stayed on all the time, regardless of if we were really in there. If it's daytime and there's plenty of light around, we don't really need those overhead lights on. But it's just this little trick to indicate to the brain the kitchen is closed. We don't need to go back in between meals and grab snacks. When I go back to fill my water, no need to turn the lights on. I just fill the water because the kitchen's closed, but the drinking fountain is always open. So I just fill my water and move along with my day without needing to get a snack because it's not mealtime when it's in between, because in between mealtime is not a time that I choose to eat. So turn the lights off when you leave the kitchen and your meal is completed. Number 2, this is called my very next bite strategy. I've mentioned this in podcasts before, but I wanted to include it here with some of my other tips and tricks. If you feel like you've eaten too much, if you feel like you made poor choices as far as the content of the meal goes, or maybe you didn't follow your plan for an entire weekend, so whether it's one overeaten meal or several days in a row, you don't need to actually start over. There's no need to have this thought, I need to get back on track. You just need to wait for hunger and then eat on plan on your very next bite. And so we call this the very next bite strategy because there seems to be a lot of drama, and this strategy actually does cross over into the thought line, because there's a lot of drama in the brain when you quote unquote mess up or you quote unquote fall off the wagon. And I have a whole episode on falling off the wagon. But this idea of just eating on plan on your very next bite, we eliminate the idea that that overeat was off plan, because I don't have a single client that has lost their weight that has not overeaten. Everyone does, because we're not robots. We don't eat the exact right amount for our bodies every single meal. Sometimes we overeat. Sometimes we undereat. Sometimes we get hungry too soon, but we make a bigger deal out of the overeats. And so when that happens, we just wait for hunger and we eat on plan with the very next bite. Whether this has happened just for one meal in the day, oh, I ate too much lunch, and you're going to wait for hunger for dinner, or it's, a whole weekend or even a week, you just use the very next bite. The next time I eat, I will eat on plan. All right, that, like I said, is one that I've shared before. I have a couple here that I haven't shared before. So number 3 is delay. Now, I love the movie Finding Nemo. I actually love all of the early Pixar movies. My kids watched them incessantly. I have them basically memorized from listening to them watch them and listening to them watch them in the car on long road trips. So if you think of that scene where Marlin, the orange fish dad, he is talking to Dory, the blue fish, and he's like, I can't afford any more delays. And you're one of those fish that cause delays. Sometimes it's a good thing. There's a whole group of fish. They're called delay fish. And Dory, she says, you mean you don't like me? And Marlin says, no, of course I like you. It's because I like you. I don't want to be with you. It's a complicated emotion. So I think of this scene and I think, no, being Dory, creating delay in our lives is actually like a superpower. Marlin tries to ditch Dory about it, but I want you to channel your inner Dory in delay. And this is what I mean by this. Being able to delay eating something or doing something, it's not just eating, but waiting for something, is a function of our prefrontal cortex. It's actually one of the privileges of being human, being able to think about what we want to have and then being able to override our immediate or animalistic desires, like, look, something shiny, it just swam over the trench, right? For the sake of long-term well-being. Right? We're not going to follow that something shiny over the trench and get into the sea of jellyfish like Dory, because she doesn't actually have that ability to delay. Marlin accuses her of being a delay fish, but she's not actually delaying for her own long-term well-being. So I want you to notice when you have an urge or a craving for a certain food that maybe doesn't fit into your plan for the day. That's when you have the opportunity to work on the skill of delay. So it looks like I want that cookie, but I'm choosing not to have it now. And that feels a lot different than I want that cookie, but I can't because I'm on a diet. The first one feels empowering. I'm choosing not to have it. And the second one feels restrictive. I can't because I'm on a diet. So choosing to delay having the cookie or the burrito when we aren't hungry or the bowl of cereal at midnight, whatever it is, instead of telling ourselves we aren't allowed to eat it, it's actually quite powerful to choose delay and at the same time acknowledge we would like to have it. It frees up our brain from trying to convince us to eat it. I hear you, brain, and also it's going to be okay. Sometimes this creates a lot of scarcity around food when we are delaying things because the brain will be like, I hardly ever come to this restaurant. My husband never brings home cupcakes. This is the first time he's ever done it, or just this once. And our brain tries to convince us as this is the last time we're going to see this food, like forever. But in reality, we could go to that restaurant tomorrow. It's probably not going out of business. We could easily put that cupcake on our plan for tomorrow or this weekend. We could go buy another one if it's stale by then. There's actually no scarcity of food in this country. Like your brain still thinks it's a field of berries that your caveman ancestors came upon. And for them, it was true. They might not come upon that berry field again for, several months or maybe even a year. So they gorged immediately. But we do not have this problem. Donut shops and cookie shops and takeout restaurants are plentiful. If you really want a donut, you can put it on your food plan for tomorrow and go buy a donut. Like it's really totally an option for you. But this is what I'm saying about delay is I want you to plan it. Choose to delay. Choose to be a delay fish. Choose to delay and not give in to the immediate demands of that toddler part of your brain. Use your prefrontal cortex to plan what you are going to eat and stick with it. So part of this is in the thought line as well, but part of this really is the A line that you are planning the food for another time. Tomorrow, this weekend, next week, when you go on a trip, whatever it is, we just remind our brain it's not an emergency. And delay is the privilege of being a human, and developing the skill will ensure your long-term well-being. Okay, number 4 trick is called be the last one done. I found it to be really disappointing when I first started really working on not counting and calculating my food and just eating according to my hunger scale. I found it to be really disappointing when I would finish my dinner and I would notice that everyone else was still eating. And I would have a lot of thoughts about they're getting to still enjoy this delicious chicken I made, and the rice and the vegetables or whatever we were having. And I would be disappointed that I wasn't still eating. And then what would happen is I would think, I'll just have a little more since they're still eating and I'm at the table, maybe a little more, a little more. And I would find myself overeating more if I finished first. I find a good technique is to be the last one done. So this is going to help you in 2 different ways. Number 1, You don't have to feel disappointed that people at the table are still eating when you're not. And number two, if you're the last one done, you've eaten slowly. So when you think about the disappointment, you can do that. You can handle disappointment. I know you can. I feel confident that you can handle any emotion. I've felt disappointed before and I can feel it again. It's not a problem. I just find that I don't need to feel it because if I eat slowly, it doesn't come up for me. But being the last one done, more importantly, means that I've eaten slowly, which means that I have chewed my food properly, which is an immense help to your digestion. And you've allowed your brain and your body to make the connection and notify you that you are starting to fill up. So when you eat really, really fast, it takes some time for the body to catch up for how much food is in the body or how much food is in the stomach. And so we don't make that connection, and we often blow past our hunger scale, +3 or +4. And you're like, whoa, I didn't realize I ate so much because we ate so fast. So being the last one done helps you because it will reinforce you eating slowly. So I put my fork down between every bite. I participate in conversation and I purposely don't pick up my fork again. I've tasted and enjoyed the dinner, and it really makes the whole experience more enjoyable all around. Plus, it's super good for digestion and totally helps you connect with your hunger scale. So it is awesome. I love being the last one done. Okay, tip number 5 is go to meals. This is a technique I use with all my clients, and it's the first thing I recommend that you do, to be honest. The technique here is to notice things from your food journal that are really, really working for you. These are foods that are generally going to be well balanced. You've heard me talk about having protein, fat, and fiber at each meal. These meals are usually going to be really balanced in that way. They're going to keep you full and satisfied for 3 to 4 hours, as that's the time frame we want to spend between meals, spending most of that time at that zero neutral time of the hunger scale. And they're also generally meals that are easy and quick and readily available for you to make. So the reason that we are looking for these is because when you go to plan your meals, or if you don't pre-plan, when you just go in the kitchen, your brain is going to be like, well, there's nothing good to eat and you've never made anything good in your whole entire life. So you better just grab a handful of chips, right? We need to have a plan, whether you are doing a full 24-hour practical plan with me or you just need to have food on hand. Go-to meals are a great way to do this. You inadvertently do this already when you go to the grocery store and you think, okay, I need my staples. I need cereal. I need lunch meat. If you make sandwiches for the kids, I need a hamburger because maybe it's always Taco Tuesday and you always make ground beef tacos on Tuesday night. So you already inadvertently do this when you think about the staples that you purchase at the grocery store. I just want you to expand that a little bit and write down some of your go-to meals for each meal, not just for dinner, but also for breakfast, also for lunch. The other reason I love go-to meals is because if you are doing a 24-hour plan, but you don't make the plan that day, or say you go to the kitchen and turns out your son ate all of the avocados and you no longer can have avocado toast for breakfast, and that was what was on your plan, you can always just choose something off of your go-to meals, and that's on plan because you know these foods work for you. So I do have a free download so that you can create your go-to meals. There's more information in the free ebook. There is a list of my go-to meals so you can get an idea of really what I'm talking about with this and the kinds of things that I put on my go-to meals. I even included a couple of my favorite recipes for those. And I go through and give some ideas for each of the meals and what you're really looking for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. And then, of course, there is a blank page for you to create your own go-to meals. So those are some of my fun tips for you. I hope this really goes beyond just choose some sugar-free gum when you're craving sugar. I think that's one of the dumbest tips I ever got when I was in my dieting days. And I remember, I think that there was a gum brand that was a major sponsor of The Biggest Loser, and they were always pushing that. So I just thought it was such a great idea. And all that gave me was a stomach ache from all the xylitol and a gum addiction where I was up to about 2 packs a day when I finally quit gum. So I feel like these tips and tricks are actually more practical, more doable, and they will not lead you to having a xylitol bloated stomach in the morning after having way, way too much gum if you're anything like me. So I will talk to you next week. As always, I would love to answer your burning question. So if you are ready to get some answers, be sure to schedule a free strategy session with me, and you can see how coaching really works in your life. Thanks again for joining me, Lisa Salisbury, in this episode of Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well.